Dixon, logging on. Now I'm going to be talking about the Atari Jaguar games, and I will be doing some comparison with some of the Atari Jaguar games to the 16-bit console games to see if the Atari Jaguar console is 64-bit as it claims to be. In other words, I'm going to do some more math to see if I can get some more right or wrong answers. Now I'm only going to be doing the 9 Jaguar games that I currently own as of now. Let's start out with the patent game, Cybermorph. As you can see, the graphics in Cybermorph is far from what the Atari Jaguar console has promised, especially for a patent game. Usually a patent game is a prime example to show what the game console can do. I suppose this is Atari's answer to both Super Nintendo's Super Mario World and Sega Genesis Sonic the Hedgehog 1 or 2. Give me a break. It's a polygon flight shooter, just like Star Fox on the Super Nintendo, except everything in Star Fox is way better. Yes, everything. The gameplay's more better, the storyline's more linear and straight, the graphics are better, and the sound and music is better. But then again, Cybermorph does have decent sound quality, but no music during the gameplay, only during the intro and the game over screen. And the music in Cybermorph is actually pretty good, but most likely everything in Star Fox is way better. Overall, Cybermorph is just a mediocre type of game. Next game.
Kasumi Ninja.
Kasumi Ninja. It's a fighting game, and a bad one. It's bad that it's just laughable. It's a cheap-ass knockoff to popular fighting games like Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter, and it failed to impress either game. Kasumi Ninja has poor sluggish controls, while using the controller feels like the game is broken down. In other words, using the controller for this game is quite uncomfortable. Plus, Kasumi Ninja has bad digitized graphics, with lame but amusing special moves and finishing moves. But pulling off a special move can be a pain. Well, it is a pain. In my ass. Because you have to hold down one of the buttons and use the D-pad with a correct pattern. Which is pretty much the opposite of pulling off a special move in either Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter. Well, then again, anything with the Atari Jaguar is backwards. Especially this game, for instance. Kasumi Ninja is a joke, but at least the game is laughable. Next game, Flashback. Now I can do a bigger comparison with all 3 cartridge console versions of Flashback. Flashback was originally a computer game, and later ported to both of the 16-bit consoles. I'll start from the beginning from my perspective. Flashback is one of my all-time favorite games on the Sega Genesis. I enjoy playing that one a lot because the gameplay was great, the music and sound is awesome, the graphics were awesome, and the replay value was always there. About a year later, I gave the Super Nintendo version a try. But the Super Nintendo version doesn't have all the awesome music or sound effects like the Genesis has. Plus, the wimpy censorship for the Nintendo was one big thing for the time, before the ESRB ratings came along. They changed the bar in New Washington to a cafe, and they changed the level Death Tower to Cyber Tower. One thing I find odd about the Super Nintendo version is why is he wearing a pink shirt instead of a white one? Or depending on how you have a color setting on your TV, it could be red, I guess. But I don't know why they changed the colors, because still during the cutscenes you see him wearing a white shirt. I don't know. And within a year later, they released an updated CD-ROM version for the PC, Sega CD, and 3DO. The only big difference with the CD-ROM version is the cutscenes have been changed from EGA graphics to cinematic animation full motion video cutscenes. And at the same time when the updated CD-ROM version was getting released, they also made an Atari Jaguar version of Flashback. With the same box art as the CD-ROM version, but it didn't have the cinematic cutscenes like the CD-ROM versions did, of course. So the Jaguar version used the old EGA cutscenes, just like the old PC version, and both the 16-bit consoles did. Now with a 64-bit console, you expect Flashback to be an improvement over both the 16-bit consoles. Well, let's see. First of all, if you're used to using a 3-button controller on the Sega Genesis, then you're going to get completely thrown off with the controls on the Jaguar controller. It's not just the layout on the Jaguar controller that's been reversed, but for games like Flashback, if you compare the Genesis controls with the Jaguar controls, the pattern for the Jaguar controls have been also reversed. Another one of these backwards ass tricks for the Atari Jaguar. And when you're playing Flashback with the Jaguar controller, it gets tedious really fast. You expect the Jaguar version of Flashback to have better graphics because it's 64-bit. I don't see anything that's 48 bits more. Do you? So the graphics haven't changed one damn bit. It's precisely the same as the Super Nintendo version with this pink shirt thing, again. But unlike the Super Nintendo version, it doesn't have this wimpy ass censorship, so that's kind of a good thing. Kind of a good thing? No, that is a good thing. No censorship is a good thing. The sound quality in Flashback's decent, but when it comes to music and sound effects, it lacks off, even more than the Super Nintendo version did. I don't think I got any more comparisons for each version of Flashback, but I can say that the Jaguar version of Flashback is easily the least likable version of them all. Out of all the cartridge console port of Flashback, I highly recommend the Sega Genesis port the most. The Super Nintendo port's not that bad, it's just inferior to the Sega Genesis counterpart. But the Atari Jaguar version of Flashback, I wouldn't waste any more of my time with. Avoid this version. Now I have to admit, I went a little overboard with Flashback because I have good memories with this game, and this is one of the only games I can compare all three versions with. Well anyway, let's move to the next game. Syndicate. Just like Flashback, Syndicate was also a PC game and ported to many consoles. But Syndicate is a real-time tactical strategy shooter game. And I would have to admit for the Atari Jaguar port of Syndicate, the numeric keypad does come in handy for this type of game. Well, it would be better if you have the overlays, of course. So that way you can see what buttons does which. But you still gotta use the D-pad to move the arrow cursor around. And using a D-pad for that part on any controller is never fun. Especially for a D-pad on the Jaguar controller. There's not much to say about Syndicate, and I haven't compared all the console ports of Syndicate, and I don't think there's no need to, because the only true way of playing the Syndicate game is on any home computer with a keyboard and a mouse. In fact, you can get a downloadable version of Syndicate from goodoldgames.com or from origingames.com for about $6. Next game, Attack of the Mutant Penguins. This is another weird one, and a rare obscure game, but once again, it can be amusing just like Kasumi Ninja. Attack of the Mutant Penguins is an overhead top view type of game. I don't know what there is to explain about this one, but I haven't digged further into the details about it, but from the looks of it, it is quite confusing to explain. I would like to do a standalone episode so I can explain more thoroughly, well, once I get more senses from my notes on this one. And once again, as you can tell, it's a weird game, and it doesn't meet the standards of the 16-bit competitors. But Attack of the Mutant Penguins is an amusing game to have in the Atari Jaguar library, just like Kasumi Ninja and Cybermorph. And that's pretty much all the weird games I have to talk about. Next game, Alien vs. Predator. Now we're talking. It's a common crossover for Alien vs. Predator games. They made different types of them, especially with the first-person shooters. It was one of the type of Alien vs. Predator games that was remade as a first-person shooter with the same concept and the same developer 3 times. First, exclusively for the Atari Jaguar console in 1994, and a remake for the home computers, PC or Mac, in 1999, and another remake for the PC and Mac home computers and Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 consoles in 2010. All first-person shooter games of Alien vs. Predator was developed by Rebellion. Well, let's mainly focus on the Jaguar version for the most part. Alien vs. Predator on the Jaguar was one of the games that convinced gamers to get a Jaguar console in the first place. The graphics were awesome, the gameplay is great, the atmosphere is quite impressive, especially when you're playing the game alone in the dark with your lights off. And the best part of the game, actually this features for all Alien vs. Predator first-person shooter games. You can select either 3 characters, 3 in as Alien, Predator, or Colonel Marine, and all 3 characters each have their own special abilities, specific kills, objectives, and story. And like I said before, the graphics for Alien vs. Predator are quite impressive for its time. Maybe dated a little for today's standards, but still decent to look back on. But once again, it doesn't really show its true 64-bit form. More likely it's 32-bit, but that's okay. It's still a kick-ass game to have in the Atari Jaguar collection, and it's one of my top favorite games on the Atari Jaguar. And I do have a lot more to say about this one, and other versions of Alien vs. Predator as well, for another time. Next game, Wolfenstein 3D. Another first-person shooter game, and another PC port game. Well, actually this port of Wolfenstein 3D is the updated Macintosh port, which makes it even better. Because the Mac port came out, I think, a few years after the PC port did, and the Mac port has more weapons and better graphics, and the gameplay and controls are great too. I just wish the Jaguar controller had shoulder buttons, so you can stray from left to right easier. Well, anyway, the Jaguar version is one of the best console ports of Wolfenstein 3D. The 3DO version of Wolfenstein 3D is also a damn good port. Yeah, the 3DO port was also ported from the Mac. And oh yeah, the Super Nintendo version of Wolfenstein 3D was also a Mac port. But once again, the Super Nintendo version of Wolfenstein 3D was released before the ESRB board, so they butchered everything on the Super Nintendo version of Wolfenstein 3D. So that pretty much makes the Jaguar victorious over the Super Nintendo on this round when it comes to Wolfenstein 3D. I honestly think the 2 best console ports of Wolfenstein 3D is on the Jaguar and 3DO console. Yes, even better than the Xbox Live Arcade version or the PlayStation Network version, since those ones were ported from the original PC port. But I would rather play the Jaguar port either using an Xbox 360 controller or a PlayStation 3 controller though. Because using the Jaguar controller does get tiresome after a while, especially when it comes to first-person shooter games, for instance. And Jaguar also has their own port of Doom. That one I currently don't own on the Jaguar, but I know for the fact that it was one of the best console ports of Doom. The only downside of that port of Doom is the lack of music. It would be nice if they had an option, because a lot of people like the music in the game, and some people just want to play the game with the music off to make it more scarier that way. And as far as I can tell, the Atari Jaguar console only had 3 first-person shooter games: Wolfenstein 3D, Doom, and Alien vs. Predator. And they're all 3 a big plus side to the Atari Jaguar console. And they're all 3 totally worth owning if you ever get around to getting your hands on a copy of each one. Next game, Defender 2000. It's an updated classic arcade game made exclusively for the Atari Jaguar console, with updated graphics, which is really good. The music and sound effects are excellent. The gameplay plays like the original, except it's a lot more easier than the original, if you know what I mean. You have a level selection that has different challenges and kick-ass backgrounds, and plus it has the original arcade port of Defender. And there's also Defender Plus, which I believe they already updated the game in between the two, original and 2000. The box art on Defender 2000 is amazing to look at. Looks like a futuristic cyberpunk Blade Runner world. Very beautiful. Defender 2000 is a fun updated arcade game. And if you can find a copy for a deal, well, the reason why I say for a deal is because the price is kinda up there these days for this game. Or if you manage to find a copy for a fair price, then I would totally go for it. Now, speaking of updated arcade classics, I saved the best for last. Here's one of the many Jaguar games that many Jaguar owners or fans know the most. And it happens to be one of the best, the best Atari Jaguar game with the highest replay value with a real kick-ass soundtrack, which gets me coming back to this game more and more and more. That one is Tempest 2000. What's to say? Tempest 2000 is worthy of the title 2000. The original 1981 arcade game was very fun. The better graphics are always stunning to look at, but the updated arcade port for the Jaguar really knows how to rock the roof off in every aspect connected with this game. The addicting gameplay, the awesome music, the kick-ass sound effects, all at its finest. There's also different types of modes in Tempest 2000 you can choose from. All modes are good, plus there's also a 2-player cooperative mode which only works with the plus mode, which is fine, it's a great feature to have, but my favorite mode is the 2000 mode, even though that's a single player mode only, but it's still pretty damn awesome. There's also a level selection in this game, especially where you can continue on a certain stage after you lose all your lives, and automatically saves your high score on that stage so you can continue where you left off at. And that's a pretty damn good feature because there's a whole lot of levels in this game I haven't even been through yet. I also have to say that Tempest 2000 can also be more difficult as you advance further. But then again, there's nothing wrong with a game that will kick your ass. In fact, dying in this game is even awesome. I love the sound effects of getting grabbed, fried, and my favorite way of dying is getting shot down. And with a vector game involving space and traveling through a time warp, it's another game that's even more better playing in the dark with the lights off. That way you'll feel like you're in a space world and outside reality. As I mentioned before, the soundtrack is fantastic. In fact, it's so awesome that they even released a soundtrack on a compact disc. Now that's a smart move on the behalf of Atari, and that's what I call a promotion. There is totally no surprise that Tempest 2000 is indeed the best game for the Atari Jaguar console period. And if you own a Jaguar console, then I highly recommend Tempest 2000 the most. Well, there you have it. That's all the Atari Jaguar games I own, and I did the math on all games, and they don't seem to live up to the 64-bit concept, as promised. The console did have good graphics that some games can be better than both 16-bit consoles, and there are some games that fail to compete with both of the 16-bit consoles. And there are games that can prove that graphics aren't everything, like Tempest 2000 for instance. And I do have thoughts about covering some of the games I explained in a standalone video, so I can explain more proper details about each game and see what I can dig up when I dig deeper in the game. Either a regular review or a now playing video. And I do like to get more Jaguar games in my collection, good games or bad games. And if I do get more Jaguar games, I'll try to do a game quickie or a full review on each game. Well, anyway, I pretty much did enough math on the Jaguar games. If I get more questions and answers, like for instance more Jaguar games, I'll try to keep you posted. Dixon, logging out.